The woman stumbled through the snow with the last fragments of her strength, clutching the silent bundle against her chest, her cracked lips moving in prayers she no longer believed would be answered. Zelda Winters had been walking for 3 days since the wagon broke down and her husband died, trying to fix the wheel in the storm. Samuel had been sick with fever for weeks before that, coughing blood into his handkerchief while insisting they press on toward California. When the axle snapped on the frozen trail through the Texas Panhandle, he had crawled beneath the wagon in the blizzard, determined to repair it himself despite his weakness. She had heard the crack of wood, then his strangled cry, and when she pulled him free, his leg was crushed and twisted at an impossible angle. He died that night, shivering in her arms while their 6-month-old daughter Emma whimpered between them. Zelda had tried to bury him, but the ground was frozen solid as iron. She covered his body with rocks and the canvas from the wagon, speaking the Lord's Prayer over him with trembling lips. Then she had gathered what little food remained, wrapped Emma in every scrap of cloth she could find, and started walking south, hoping to find a town or ranch before the cold claimed them both. That had been 3 days ago. The food ran out yesterday morning. Emma had stopped crying 12 hours ago, and that silence terrified Zelda more than any sound in the world. The baby still breathed, but barely, her tiny chest rising and falling with such fragile movements that Zelda checked constantly to make sure her daughter still lived. The wind howled across the frozen plains, cutting through Zelda's threadbare coat like knives. Her feet were numb inside her worn boots, and she suspected frostbite had already claimed her toes. She could no longer feel her fingers. The landscape stretched endlessly white in every direction, and as the sun began to set on the 3rd day, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold that would have been beautiful if they did not herald another deadly night, Zelda finally accepted that she and Emma were going to die out here. She sank to her knees in the snow, too exhausted to take another step. Emma lay motionless in her arms, her little face pale as death. Zelda bent her head over her daughter and wept, her tears freezing on her cheeks. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry, my sweet girl. Mama tried so hard." The darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. She thought about lying down in the snow, letting the cold take them both quickly. It would be easier than struggling through another night. She was so tired, so very tired, and the snow looked soft as a feather bed. Then she heard it, the sound of hoofbeats. Zelda's head jerked up, her heart pounding. Through the swirling snow, she saw a figure on horseback approaching, a dark silhouette against the white landscape. For a moment, she thought it was a hallucination, a cruel trick of her dying mind. But the hoofbeats grew louder, more real, and then the rider was pulling his horse to a stop 20 feet away. "Sweet Jesus," a man's voice said, rough with shock. Zelda tried to speak, but her frozen lips would not form words. She could only stare up at the cowboy as he swung down from his horse and ran toward her through the snow. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. A dark beard covered the lower half of his face, and his eyes were a startling blue in his weathered, sun-browned face. "Madam, can you hear me?" He dropped to his knees beside her, and she could see the shock and concern in his expression. His gloved hands hovered over her as if he was afraid to touch her. "How long have you been out here?" "Please," Zelda managed to rasp. "My baby. Please help my baby." The cowboy's gaze dropped to the bundle in her arms, and his eyes widened. "You have a child with you? Let me see." With trembling hands, Zelda pulled back the layers of cloth covering Emma's face. The baby was so pale, her lips tinged with blue, her eyes closed. For one horrible moment, Zelda thought she was already gone. Then Emma's chest rose with a tiny, shallow breath. "She is still breathing," the cowboy said, his voice tight with urgency. "But barely. We need to get you both warm right now." He looked around at the darkening landscape, then back at Zelda. "I have a camp about a mile from here. Can you ride?" Zelda tried to nod, but her body would not obey. The darkness was closing in again, and she felt herself swaying. "Stay with me," the cowboy said sharply. "Do not pass out on me now. Your baby needs you." When Zelda's eyes started to close, he reached out and gripped her shoulder firmly. "Look at me. What is your name?" "Zelda," she whispered. "Zelda Winters." "I am Jacob Quinn," he said, "and I promise you, Zelda Winters, I am not going to let you or your baby die out here. Do you understand me? You are going to be all right." Zelda wanted to believe him, but she had no strength left for hope. Still, when Jacob gathered her into his arms, lifting her and Emma both as easily as if they weighed nothing, she did not resist. He carried her to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding that stood patiently in the snow, and somehow managed to mount with her still in his arms. He settled her in front of him on the saddle, keeping one strong arm wrapped around her waist to hold her upright, the other hand holding the reins. "Hold on to your baby," he said against her ear, his breath warm on her frozen skin. Just a little longer now. The ride to his camp was a blur of pain and cold. Zelda drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid warmth of Jacob's body behind her. She could feel Emma's weight in her arms, that precious burden she refused to release even as her strength faded. Then they were stopping, and Jacob was dismounting, pulling her down from the saddle with careful hands. She saw the orange glow of a fire, a small tent pitched in the shelter of a rocky outcropping. Jacob carried her to the fire and set her down gently on a bedroll he had spread on the ground. "Stay right there," he ordered, though Zelda could not have moved if she wanted to. He quickly unsaddled his horse and led it to a rope line strung between two stunted trees, then hurried back to the fire. "Let me see the baby," he said, kneeling beside Zelda. His hands were bare now, and she noticed they were strong and scarred, working man's hands. He reached for Emma with surprising gentleness. Zelda's arms tightened instinctively around her daughter. After 3 days of protecting this tiny life, she could not simply hand Emma over to a stranger, even one who had saved them. "I am not going to hurt her," Jacob said quietly, meeting Zelda's eyes. "But she needs to be warmed up carefully, or her heart could stop. I have seen frostbite and hypothermia before. I know what to do. Please, let me help her." Something in his steady blue gaze made Zelda trust him. She loosened her grip, and Jacob lifted Emma from her arms with infinite care. He unwrapped the layers of frozen cloth around the baby, examining her with focused intensity. "She is alive," he murmured, "but just barely. Her breathing is too shallow." He glanced at Zelda. "When did she last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Zelda said, her voice cracking. "I had nothing left to give her." Jacob's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "All right, first things first. We need to warm her up, then get some liquid into her." He looked at Zelda. "Can you nurse her?" Zelda's eyes filled with tears. "I tried this morning, but nothing would come. I think my milk dried up. I have not had enough food or water myself." "That happens," Jacob said matter-of-factly. "We will work around it." He wrapped Emma in his own wool blanket, holding her against his chest as he moved closer to the fire. "I have some canned milk in my supplies. It is meant for coffee, but it will do for the baby if we water it down." Zelda watched through blurred eyes as Jacob tended to her daughter, with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. He kept Emma wrapped tightly, warming her gradually by the fire while he heated water in a small pot. He found the can of condensed milk in his saddlebag and mixed it carefully with the warm water, testing the temperature on his wrist before he soaked a clean cloth in the mixture. "Come here," he said to Zelda. "You should be the one to feed her." Zelda crawled closer to the fire, wincing at the pins and needles sensation as feeling began to return to her frozen limbs. Jacob handed Emma to her, then gave her the milk-soaked cloth. "Let her suck on this," he instructed. "Just a little at a time, too much at once and she might choke or get sick." Zelda pressed the cloth to Emma's blue-tinged lips, praying her daughter would respond. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then Emma's mouth moved, her lips parting slightly, and she began to suck weakly at the cloth. "That is it," Jacob said quietly. "Good girl. That is it." Tears streamed down Zelda's face as she watched her daughter drink. Each tiny swallow felt like a miracle. Emma's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but alive, and she made a small sound, barely more than a whimper. "She is going to be all right," Jacob said. "Keep giving her the milk slowly. I am going to take care of you now." "I am fine," Zelda protested automatically, though she was shaking so hard she could barely hold the cloth steady. "You are half frozen and starving," Jacob said bluntly. "When is the last time you ate?" "I do not remember." "That is what I thought." He moved around the camp with practiced ease, adding more wood to the fire until it blazed hot and bright, then filling another pot with snow to melt for drinking water. From his supplies, he produced a tin of beans, some hardtack, and a small sack of coffee. It is not much of a meal, but it is warm food. You need to eat. The baby, Zelda said weakly. I need to feed her. You can do both. Jacob set the beans to warm over the fire, then poured some of the heated water into a tin cup and added coffee grounds. He pressed the cup into Zelda's free hand. Drink this. You need fluids. The coffee was bitter and scalding hot, but it was the most wonderful thing Zelda had ever tasted. She sipped it carefully while continuing to give Emma the milk-soaked cloth, watching her daughter's face slowly regain some color. The baby's breathing deepened, became more regular, and hope flickered to life in Zelda's chest. Jacob handed her a plate of beans and hardtack. Eat, he ordered. All of it. You need your strength. Zelda wanted to argue that she was not hungry, but the smell of the warm food made her stomach clench with sudden, desperate need. She ate with her free hand, shoving the food into her mouth so fast she barely tasted it. Jacob watched her without comment, then refilled her plate when she finished. Slower this time, he advised. You will make yourself sick eating so fast after starving. Zelda forced herself to eat more slowly, even though every instinct screamed at her to gorge herself. Emma continued to suck weakly at the milk-soaked cloth, and Zelda kept replacing it with fresh one, following Jacob's instructions. As the warmth of the fire seeped into her bones and food filled her empty stomach, Zelda felt strength trickling back into her body. The shaking subsided, her mind cleared, and with that clarity came the full realization of what had almost happened, how close she and Emma had come to dying in the snow. Thank you, she whispered, looking at Jacob across the fire. You saved our lives. Jacob was pouring himself a cup of coffee, his movements economical and precise. He glanced up at her words, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. You do not need to thank me for basic human decency. Still, Zelda insisted, if you had not found us when you did, we would have been dead before morning. Then it is a good thing I was riding this way. Jacob sipped his coffee, studying her over the rim of the cup. What were you doing out there alone with a baby in the middle of a blizzard? Zelda looked down at Emma, who was finally sleeping peacefully in her arms. My husband died 3 days ago. Our wagon broke, and he was trying to fix it. The axle collapsed and crushed his leg. I tried to save him, but the wound was too severe, and he had already been sick with fever. After he passed, I had no choice but to walk. I thought I could reach a town before the storm got worse, but I was wrong about the distance. Where were you headed? California, originally. We left Kansas 4 months ago. Samuel, my husband, had heard there was good land for farming in the Sacramento Valley. We had saved for 3 years to make the journey. She felt the tears coming again and blinked them back. It all seems so foolish now. It is not foolish to want a better life, Jacob said quietly. Half the people in the West are here for the same reason. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it does not. That is just how it is. Where are you from? Zelda asked, wanting to shift the conversation away from her own tragedy. All over, originally. Born in Missouri, grew up in Colorado, spent time in Montana and Wyoming. I have been working cattle drives and ranch jobs for 15 years now. Jacob added another log to the fire. I am heading to Desdemona, Texas. There is a ranch there that is hiring. Should be about 2 days' ride south, weather permitting. Is that a real town? Zelda asked. With people and supplies? It is small, but yes. There is a general store, a doctor, a church, a saloon. Maybe 200 people live there, give or take. Jacob studied her thoughtfully. You and the baby need proper rest and care before you make any decisions about where to go next. I can take you to Desdemona tomorrow if the storm breaks. The doctor there can check you both over, make sure there is no lasting damage from the cold. I have no money to pay a doctor, Zelda admitted, shame heating her cheeks. Samuel and I spent almost everything we had on supplies for the journey. What little cash we had left was in the wagon, and I could not carry it all when I started walking. I brought what I could, but it is not much. We will figure that out when we get there, Jacob said. Right now, you need to focus on getting your strength back and keeping that baby warm and fed. He gestured to his tent. You and Emma should sleep in there tonight. It will protect you from the wind. I will keep the fire going. Where will you sleep? I have my bedroll. I will be fine by the fire. I cannot take your shelter, Zelda protested. You have already done so much. You have a baby, Jacob said firmly. You need the tent more than I do. Do not argue with me about this." Zelda recognized the tone of a man who would not be swayed. She nodded, too exhausted to fight. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn." "Jacob," he corrected. "Just Jacob." "Jacob," she repeated. "I am Zelda, and this is Emma." "I know. You told me already." A hint of amusement crossed his weathered face. "You also told me when you were half frozen and barely conscious, so I am not surprised you do not remember." Zelda felt her face flush. "I do not remember much of the ride here. It is all a blur." "That is the cold. It muddles your thinking." Jacob stood and walked to the tent, holding the flap open. "Come on, let me get you settled for the night. You need real sleep." Zelda let Jacob help her into the tent, still clutching Emma close. Inside, the space was small but surprisingly cozy, protected from the bitter wind. Jacob spread several blankets on the ground and helped Zelda lie down with the baby cradled against her chest. "Keep her close to you for warmth," he instructed. "And if she wakes in the night and seems hungry, call me. I will heat more milk for her." "You need sleep too," Zelda pointed out. "I am used to short nights and rough conditions. Do not worry about me." Jacob pulled the blankets up over both of them, tucking the edges in carefully. His hands were gentle but impersonal, like a brother caring for a sister. "Try to rest, Zelda. You are safe now." As Jacob left the tent and returned to the fire, Zelda felt something tight in her chest finally begin to loosen. For 3 days she had been alone with her terror and grief, responsible for keeping Emma alive, with no help and no hope. Now, impossibly, a stranger had appeared and offered them shelter and safety without asking for anything in return. She knew she should be wary. She knew nothing about Jacob Quinn, except that he was a cowboy heading to Desdemona for work. He could be dangerous. He could have ulterior motives. But her instincts, honed by years of marriage to a good man, told her that Jacob was exactly what he appeared to be, a decent human being who could not ride past someone in need. "My fire is yours now," Jacob had said, as he settled them by the flames, so quietly she had barely heard him. But the words had lodged in her heart, a simple promise that meant more than all the poetry in the world. Zelda closed her eyes and let sleep take her, trusting this stranger to keep them safe through the night. When Zelda woke, pale sunlight was filtering through the canvas of the tent. For a disoriented moment, she could not remember where she was. Then Emma stirred against her chest, making a soft mewing sound, and the previous day came rushing back. Zelda sat up carefully, checking her daughter. Emma's color looked better, her breathing strong and steady. As Zelda examined the tiny fingers and toes, she found no signs of frostbite, which seemed like a miracle given how cold the baby had been. Relief flooded through her. "You are all right," she whispered, kissing Emma's forehead. "We are going to be all right." She heard voices outside the tent and stiffened with sudden fear. Jacob was talking to someone, a man with a higher, younger voice. Zelda clutched Emma tighter, her heart racing. Who else was out here? "Is she awake?" the stranger asked. "I have not checked yet," Jacob replied. "Let her sleep as long as she needs. She nearly died yesterday." "And you are sure she is not part of a larger group? That nobody is going to come looking for her?" "Her husband is dead and buried 3 days north of here. She and the baby were alone." Jacob's voice took on a hard edge. "Why are you asking?" "Just making sure we are not going to have trouble. You know how it is." "No, I do not know how it is. Explain it to me." There was a pause. "I am just saying, you do not know this woman. She could be running from something. She could be trouble. She could also be exactly what she appears to be, a widow trying to survive with her baby." Jacob's tone brooked no argument. "I am taking her to Desdemona today. If you have a problem with that, you can ride on ahead alone." "I did not say I had a problem with it. I am just being cautious." "Your caution is noted. Now help me pack up this camp. I want to be on the trail within the hour." Zelda felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. She understood the stranger's suspicions, even if she hated them. Lone women in the West were often viewed with distrust, especially if they had no male protection. But after everything she had endured, being treated like a potential criminal was salt in an open wound. She took a deep breath, composing herself, then called out, "I am awake." The voices outside stopped. A moment later, Jacob appeared at the tent flap. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" "Better," Zelda said honestly. "Stronger. Emma seems better too." "Let me see her." Jacob came into the tent and knelt beside them, examining Emma with the same focused care he had shown the previous night. He checked the baby's fingers and toes, felt her forehead, listened to her breathing. "She looks good. You did well keeping her warm through the night." "You are the one who saved her," Zelda said quietly. "I was about to give up when you found us. But you did not give up. You kept fighting for her." Jacob's blue eyes met hers. "That takes strength." A shadow fell across the tent opening. "Jacob, are we packing up or not?" Jacob glanced over his shoulder. "Give us a minute, Henry." The shadow moved away. Jacob looked back at Zelda, and she saw a flicker of apology in his expression. "That is Henry Prescott. We have been traveling together for the past week, both heading to the same ranch in Desdemona. He is a little rough around the edges, but he is not a bad man." "He does not trust me," Zelda said. "He does not know you. Once he sees you are not a threat, he will be fine." Jacob stood. "Are you strong enough to ride today? I know you are still recovering, but the weather looks like it might turn again, and I would rather get you to town before another storm hits." Zelda tested her limbs, flexing her fingers and toes. Everything hurt, and she was still weak, but she thought she could manage. "I can ride if you have a horse for me." "You will ride with me," Jacob said. "Same as yesterday. I am not putting you on a horse alone when you are this weak. If you fell off, you could hurt yourself and the baby." Zelda wanted to protest that she was capable of riding alone, but she knew he was right. She was in no condition to control a horse, especially while holding Emma. "All right," she agreed. "Thank you." Jacob helped her out of the tent. The morning was clear and cold, the sky a brilliant blue overhead. The storm had passed, leaving the landscape blanketed in fresh snow that sparkled in the sunlight. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Now, Zelda looked at all that white and shuddered, remembering the terror of being lost in it. Henry Prescott was a young man, perhaps 22 or 23. With sandy blonde hair and a thin mustache he was clearly trying to grow in. He watched Zelda with wary eyes as she emerged from the tent, his hand resting on the gun at his hip in a way that made her nervous. "Morning, madam," he said stiffly. "Name is Henry Prescott." "Zelda Winters," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "Thank you for allowing me to intrude on your camp." "Was not much of a choice, was it?" Henry said. "Could not exactly leave you and the baby to freeze." "Henry," Jacob said warningly. "I am just being honest." Henry shrugged. "Anyway, I will help you pack up so we can get moving." The two men worked quickly to break down the camp, while Zelda sat by the dying fire, feeding Emma more of the watered-down milk. The baby drank more eagerly this morning, her little fists waving in the air, and Zelda felt her heart lift with hope. They were going to survive this. Against all odds, they were going to make it. Within an hour, the camp was packed and the fire extinguished. Jacob lifted Zelda and Emma onto his horse, then mounted behind them with easy grace. Henry rode a gray mare that looked as tough and no-nonsense as its owner. "Desdemona is about 2 days south," Jacob said as they started riding. "We will camp once tonight, then reach town by tomorrow afternoon. I will take it slow so you and the baby do not get too cold." Zelda nodded, grateful for his consideration. Riding with Jacob was nothing like the terrifying journey the previous night. This morning, she was fully conscious and aware of every detail, the solid warmth of Jacob's body behind her, the strong arm around her waist holding her steady, the easy way he controlled the horse with his free hand. He smelled like leather and wood smoke, and something clean she could not quite identify. She found herself hyper-aware of him in a way that made her uncomfortable. It had only been 3 days since Samuel died. She should not be noticing another man's scent or the feel of his arm around her. Guilt stabbed through her, sharp and cold. "You are shaking," Jacob observed. "Are you cold?" "No, I am fine," Zelda lied. "There is an extra blanket in the saddlebag if you need it." "I am fine," she repeated firmly. They rode in silence for a while. Henry ranged ahead, scouting the trail. Jacob kept the pace slow and steady, exactly as he had promised. Whenever Zelda shifted Emma in her arms, Jacob adjusted his hold to make sure they both stayed secure. "Tell me about your husband," Jacob said after an hour of riding. "What was he like?" Zelda stiffened. "Why do you want to know?" "Because you lost him 3 days ago, and you have not talked about him. Sometimes it helps to talk." Jacob's voice was gentle. "But if you would rather not, that is fine too." Zelda was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she began to speak. Samuel was a good man. Not perfect, but good. He was a farmer's son from Kansas, steady and hardworking. We married when I was 18, and he was 21. That was 4 years ago. She looked down at Emma. We wanted a family, wanted to build something that would last. When we heard about the land in California, it seemed like the answer to our prayers. What happened to him? Jacob asked. Before the wagon accident, I mean. You said he was sick. He caught fever about a month into the journey. I do not know what kind. We did not have money for a doctor, and Samuel kept insisting he was fine, that it would pass on its own. But it did not pass. He just got weaker and weaker, and then the wagon broke, and then he died. Zelda's voice cracked. I keep thinking, if I had insisted we stop and find help, maybe he would still be alive. You cannot think that way, Jacob said firmly. You did the best you could with what you had. Sometimes people die, and there is nothing anyone could have done to stop it. That is the hard truth of life out here. I know, Zelda whispered, but knowing does not make it easier. No, Jacob agreed. It does not. They rode on through the white landscape. Zelda found herself relaxing against Jacob's chest, too tired to maintain her rigid posture. If he noticed, he did not comment. His arm stayed steady around her waist, protective without being possessive. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat. Henry built a small fire, while Jacob helped Zelda down from the saddle. Her legs were shaky, and she would have fallen if Jacob had not caught her. Easy, he said. You are still weak. Do not push yourself too hard. I am fine, Zelda said automatically, but she let him help her to a seat by the fire. Emma was fussing, her little face scrunched up in displeasure, and Zelda knew she was hungry again. Jacob prepared the milk without being asked, warming it carefully and soaking a clean cloth for Emma to suck. He handed it to Zelda, then gave her a piece of dried meat and some hardtack for herself. You need to keep your strength up, he said, especially if you're going to keep feeding the baby. My milk has not come back yet, Zelda said quietly, aware of Henry listening nearby. I do not know if it will. The doctor and Desdemona might be able to help with that, Jacob said. In the meantime, we will keep giving her the canned milk. It is not ideal, but it will keep her alive until we figure out something better. Henry spoke up for the first time since they had stopped. How is a widow with a baby going to survive in Desdemona? It is not like there are a lot of opportunities for women out there. That is none of our concern, Jacob said sharply. Our job is to get her to town safely. What happens after that is her decision. I am just saying it is going to be hard for her. I am aware it will be hard, Zelda said, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. But I do not have a choice. I will find work somehow. I can cook, clean, sew. Somebody will need those skills. Henry looked skeptical, but said nothing more. They finished their meal in silence, then mounted up and continued riding south. The landscape gradually began to change as they left the worst of the winter weather behind. The snow thinned, and patches of brown grass appeared. By late afternoon, they were riding through open prairie dotted with scrub brush and the occasional stunted tree. That night, they made camp in a small grove that offered some protection from the wind. Jacob and Henry worked together to set up the tent and build a fire, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who had done this many times before. Zelda tried to help, but Jacob waved her away. You are still recovering, he said. Just rest and take care of Emma. Zelda sat by the fire, feeling useless. She hated being dependent on others, hated the sense of helplessness that came with having no resources and no options. But there was nothing she could do about it now. She had to accept help, at least until she was strong enough to stand on her own again. As darkness fell, Jacob cooked a simple meal of beans and salt pork. They ate in silence, the crackling fire the only sound. Henry retired early, rolling himself in his blankets by the fire. Jacob gave Zelda and Emma the tent again, insisting he was fine sleeping outside. You do not have to keep giving up your shelter for us, Zelda said, as he tucked the blankets around her and Emma. Yes, I do, Jacob replied simply. You have a baby. That changes things. Still, you have been so kind, and I have no way to repay you. Jacob met her eyes, his expression serious. I do not want repayment. I am just doing what anyone should do. Not everyone would, Zelda said softly. Most people would have ridden past. Then most people are cowards. Jacob stood. Sleep well, Zelda. We will reach Desdemona tomorrow." As he left the tent, Zelda lay awake for a long time, thinking about Jacob Quinn. He was unlike any man she had ever met, including Samuel. Her husband had been kind and steady, but also cautious, sometimes to the point of paralysis. Jacob seemed to operate on pure instinct, making decisions quickly and following through without hesitation. He had taken on the responsibility of two strangers without a second thought, asking nothing in return. It unsettled her, this easy generosity. She did not understand what motivated it. But as Emma slept peacefully in her arms, warm and safe and alive, Zelda found herself profoundly grateful that Jacob Quinn had been the one to find them in the snow. The next day dawned clear and surprisingly warm. As they rode south, the last traces of snow disappeared, replaced by the brown and gold landscape of North Texas. Zelda's spirits lifted as the temperature rose. Emma seemed more alert, her dark eyes open and curious, tracking the movement around her. "She looks good," Jacob observed, glancing down at the baby in Zelda's arms. "Much better than 2 days ago." "She has you to thank for that," Zelda said. "She has her mother to thank," Jacob corrected. "You were the one who kept her alive for 3 days in a blizzard, with no food and no shelter. That takes a special kind of strength." Zelda did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She was still processing everything that had happened, still trying to reconcile her old life with her new reality. 4 days ago, she had been a wife, part of a partnership heading toward a shared dream. Now, she was a widow with a 6-month-old baby and no prospects, dependent on the charity of strangers. They reached Desdemona in the early afternoon. The town was small, just a handful of buildings clustered along a single dirt road. But after days in the wilderness, it looked like paradise to Zelda. She saw a general store, a blacksmith shop, a church with a white steeple, a saloon, and several other buildings she could not immediately identify. Jacob guided his horse down the main street, with Henry following close behind. People turned to stare at them as they passed, their eyes lingering on Zelda and the baby. She felt her face heat with embarrassment and shame. She knew what they were thinking. Who was this woman, and why was she riding with these men? Jacob seemed oblivious to the stares. He stopped in front of a building with a sign that read, "Dr. Marcus Gray, Physician," and dismounted. He helped Zelda down, steadying her when her legs wobbled. "Wait here," he said. "I will see if the doctor is in." Jacob strode into the building with the confidence of a man who expected to be accommodated. Zelda stood on the wooden sidewalk, clutching Emma close, feeling the weight of a dozen curious stares. Henry had dismounted as well and was standing nearby, looking uncomfortable. "Do not worry about them," he said gruffly, gesturing to the onlookers. "Small towns are always like this. They will lose interest soon enough." "Thank you," Zelda said, surprised by the kindness in his voice. It was the first time Henry had spoken to her directly without suspicion. Jacob emerged from the building a moment later. "The doctor will see you now. Come on." He ushered Zelda inside, leaving Henry to watch the horses. The interior of the doctor's office was clean and well organized, with shelves of bottles and medical instruments lining the walls. A man in his 50s with graying hair and wire-rimmed spectacles looked up from a desk as they entered. "Good afternoon," he said, rising to his feet. "I am Dr. Gray. Jacob here tells me you and your baby have been through quite an ordeal." "Yes, sir," Zelda said quietly. "We were lost in the blizzard up north. My husband died, and we nearly froze before Jacob found us." Dr. Gray's expression softened with sympathy. "I am very sorry for your loss. Let me examine you and the baby, make sure there is no lasting damage from the cold." He gestured to an examination table. "Please, have a seat." Zelda sat, still holding Emma. Dr. Gray washed his hands in a basin, then approached with gentle professionalism. He examined Emma first, checking her extremities for frostbite, listening to her heart and lungs, feeling her abdomen. "The baby appears healthy," he said after several minutes. "Her lungs are clear, her heart sounds strong, and I see no signs of frostbite. That is quite remarkable, given what you have been through." "Jacob heated milk for her and made sure she stayed warm," Zelda explained. "He saved her life." "And yours, I imagine," Dr. Gray said, glancing at Jacob, who was standing near the door with his arms crossed. "Well done." "I just did what needed doing," Jacob said. Dr. Gray turned his attention to Zelda next, examining her hands and feet, listening to her breathing, checking her for signs of illness. "You have some minor frostbite on your toes," he said, but nothing that will not heal with time and care. You are malnourished and exhausted, but otherwise healthy. You were very lucky." "I know," Zelda whispered. "Jacob mentioned that your milk has dried up. Is that correct?" Zelda felt her face flush with embarrassment, but she nodded. "I tried nursing Emma 2 days ago, but nothing would come. I think it was because I had not eaten or had water in so long." "That is likely," Dr. Gray agreed. "Sometimes the milk will come back once you are properly nourished again. Keep trying to nurse her, and make sure you are eating enough and drinking plenty of fluids. In the meantime, continue feeding her the diluted milk. It is not ideal, but it will keep her healthy." "How much do I owe you?" Zelda asked, dreading the answer. Dr. Gray glanced at Jacob, then back at Zelda. "Let us call it $2. Zelda reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the small leather purse she had managed to save from the wagon. Inside was $8 and some change, all the money she had left in the world. She counted out $2 with trembling hands and gave it to the doctor. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "You are very welcome, young lady. Take care of yourself and that baby." Dr. Gray walked them to the door. "Jacob, a word?" Jacob stepped back inside the office. Zelda waited on the sidewalk with Emma, unable to hear what the two men were saying. After a moment, Jacob emerged, his expression unreadable. "What did he say?" Zelda asked. "He gave me some advice on how to care for you and Emma over the next few days," Jacob said. "Nothing important." He looked down the street, then back at Zelda. "You need a place to stay. There is a boarding house at the end of town. I will take you there and pay for a week's lodging while you figure out your next steps." "No," Zelda said immediately. "You have already done too much. I cannot let you pay for my housing." "You only have $6 left," Jacob pointed out. "That will not last long." Zelda stared at him. "How do you know how much money I have? I saw you count it out for the doctor. I am not blind." Jacob's expression was stern. "You need time to recover and find work. A week of lodging will give you that time. Do not argue with me about this." "I do not need your charity," Zelda said, even though she knew it was a lie. She absolutely needed his charity. She just hated admitting it. It is not charity. It is common sense. Jacob started walking down the street, clearly expecting her to follow. After a moment of hesitation, Zelda did. The boarding house was a 2-story wooden building that looked clean and well-maintained. A sign above the door read, "Mrs. Margaret Fletcher, Proprietor." Jacob knocked, and a moment later, the door opened to reveal a plump woman in her 60s with gray hair pinned in a neat bun. "Can I help you?" she asked, her eyes moving from Jacob to Zelda and Emma. "This is Zelda Winters," Jacob said. "She is a widow traveling with her baby. She needs a room for a week while she gets her bearings in town. I will pay the full amount now." Mrs. Fletcher's sharp eyes assessed Zelda, taking in her worn clothes and exhausted face. Then her expression softened. "Come in, dear. You look like you have been through the ringer." Zelda followed Mrs. Fletcher inside, with Jacob close behind. The interior of the boarding house was warm and inviting, with lace curtains on the windows and the smell of fresh bread in the air. Mrs. Fletcher led them to a small parlor and gestured for Zelda to sit. "Tell me what happened," she said kindly. Zelda explained the story again. The journey west, Samuel's death, the walk through the blizzard, Jacob finding her and Emma just in time. Mrs. Fletcher listened with a sympathetic expression, shaking her head at intervals. "You poor thing," she said when Zelda finished, "and with a baby, no less. Well, you are safe now. I have a room on the 2nd floor that will suit you nicely. It has a bed, a wash basin, and a small stove for heat. Meals are included in the price. Breakfast at 7, dinner at 6. If you need anything else, you just let me know." "How much for the week?" Jacob asked. $5, including meals." Jacob pulled out his wallet and counted out the money. Zelda watched, feeling a mixture of gratitude and humiliation. She hated being dependent on his generosity, but what choice did she have? "Thank you," she said quietly as Mrs. Fletcher pocketed the money. "Do not thank me yet," Mrs. Fletcher said with a smile. "Wait until you have tasted my cooking." She stood. "Let me show you to your room." Zelda followed the older woman upstairs, with Jacob carrying her small bundle of belongings. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a simple wooden washstand, and a small cast-iron stove in the corner. A window looked out over the main street. "It is perfect," Zelda said, meaning it. After days of sleeping on the cold ground, the prospect of a real bed felt like unimaginable luxury. "I will bring up some hot water so you can wash," Mrs. Fletcher said, "and if you need anything for the baby, just let me know. I raised 4 children of my own, so I know what is needed." "Thank you," Zelda said again. It seemed like all she could say lately. Mrs. Fletcher left, and Jacob set Zelda's bundle on the bed. He stood there awkwardly, as if unsure what to say now that his duty was done. "I should go," he finally said. "Henry and I need to get to the ranch and see about those jobs." "Of course," Zelda said. "Thank you, Jacob, for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me." Jacob's blue eyes were serious. "Just take care of yourself and Emma. That is all the thanks I need." He turned to leave, and Zelda felt a sudden, irrational panic at the thought of him walking out of her life. "Will I see you again?" she blurted out. Jacob paused in the doorway. "I will be working at the Double R Ranch, about 5 miles west of town. If you need anything, you can send word there." He hesitated. "And I will check on you in a few days. Make sure you are settling in all right." "You do not have to do that." "I know I do not have to. I want to." With that, Jacob tipped his hat to her and left. Zelda stood alone in the small room, listening to his footsteps fade down the stairs. Emma was asleep in her arms, her tiny face peaceful. For the first time in days, Zelda allowed herself to truly feel the magnitude of everything that had happened. She sank onto the bed and let the tears come, sobbing quietly so she would not disturb the baby. She cried for Samuel, for the life they had planned together that would never be. She cried for herself, for the terrifying uncertainty of her future. And, though she barely understood why, she cried for the strange, unexpected connection she felt to Jacob Quinn, the cowboy who had saved her life, and then walked away without asking for anything in return. The next few days passed in a blur of exhaustion and recovery. Mrs. Fletcher proved to be a godsend, providing not just food and shelter, but also practical help with Emma. She showed Zelda how to make a better milk mixture for the baby, taught her to wrap Emma in a way that kept her warm without overheating, and even watched the baby for an hour each day so Zelda could rest. Slowly, Zelda's strength returned. Her frostbitten toes healed. The constant exhaustion faded. Her milk even began to come back, just as Dr. Gray had predicted, and soon Emma was nursing properly again. With each passing day, Zelda felt more like herself, and less like the half-frozen ghost Jacob had found in the snow. But with physical recovery came the stark reality of her situation. She had a little less than $6 to her name, no husband, no family, and no prospects. She needed to find work, and quickly, or she and Emma would be destitute. On her 3rd day in Desdemona, Zelda left Emma with Mrs. Fletcher and went looking for employment. She visited the general store first, asking if they needed help with cleaning or bookkeeping. The owner, a brusque man named Mr. Carson, looked her up and down with undisguised skepticism. "You have a baby, do you not?" he asked. "Yes, but I can arrange for someone to watch her while I work." "I do not need any help right now," Mr. Carson said flatly. "Try the saloon. They might have use for you there." The way he said it, with a slight sneer, made Zelda's blood boil. She understood what he was implying, that the only work available to a lone woman was the kind that compromised her virtue. She walked out of the store with her head held high, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She tried the church next, hoping the minister might know of families needing help with cooking or cleaning. Reverend Thomas was a kind man in his 40s who listened sympathetically to her story. "I wish I could help," he said. "But the truth is, most families in Desdemona do their own work. We are a small community, and money is tight for everyone. The only people who can afford to hire help are the ranchers, and most of them already have their own arrangements." "Is there nothing?" Zelda asked, hearing the desperation in her own voice. Reverend Thomas thought for a moment. "The school teacher, Miss Caroline Pierce, mentioned she could use help with the younger students. She teaches children from age 5 to 15, and the little ones can be a handful. If you are good with children, that might be an option. The pay would not be much, but it is honest work. Where can I find Miss Pierce?" "The schoolhouse is at the north end of town, the small building painted white. School lets out at 3 o'clock. You could speak with her then." Zelda thanked the Reverend and headed to the schoolhouse. She arrived just as children were pouring out the door, laughing and shouting. A young woman in her late 20s stood in the doorway, watching them with patient amusement. She had brown hair pulled back in a sensible style and wore a simple but neat dress. "Miss Pierce?" Zelda approached cautiously. "Yes?" The woman turned, her expression friendly and curious. "My name is Zelda Winters. Reverend Thomas suggested I speak with you about helping with the younger students. He said you might need assistance." Caroline Pierce's face lit up. "Oh, that would be wonderful. Come inside. Let us talk." They went into the schoolhouse, a single room with rows of benches and a blackboard at the front. Caroline gestured for Zelda to sit, then took a seat across from her. "Tell me about yourself," Caroline said. "Are you new to Desdemona?" Zelda explained her situation once again, leaving out the more harrowing details. Caroline listened with sympathy and understanding. "I am so sorry for your loss," she said when Zelda finished. "It must be terribly difficult being alone with a baby. But if you need work, I would be happy to have your help. The younger children, the ones aged 5 to 8, need someone to work with them on their letters and numbers while I teach the older students. It is only a few hours a day, and the pay is modest, but it is something." "How modest?" Zelda asked, trying not to sound desperate. "I could offer you $3 a week. I know it is not much, but the school budget is limited." $3 a week, plus the room and board she had already paid for. It would be tight, but it might be enough to get by until she could find something better. "I will take it," Zelda said quickly. "When can I start?" "Monday, if that works for you. School runs Monday through Friday, 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. You would work with the younger children from 9 until noon." "That is perfect," Zelda said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you so much, Miss Pierce. Please call me Caroline, and thank you. You have no idea how much I need the help." As Zelda walked back to the boarding house, she felt lighter than she had in days. It was not much, but it was a start. She had a place to stay, a job, and her daughter was healthy. They were going to survive this. When she returned to the boarding house, Mrs. Fletcher was rocking Emma by the fire, humming softly. She looked up as Zelda entered, her expression hopeful. "Any luck?" she asked. "I found work," Zelda said, unable to keep the smile off her face. "At the school, helping with the young children. It is only $3 a week, but it is something." "That is wonderful news," Mrs. Fletcher beamed at her. "And do not worry about the baby during the day. I can watch her while you work. I have nothing but time, and I miss having little ones around." "I could not ask you to do that for free," Zelda protested. "You are not asking. I am offering." Mrs. Fletcher's tone brooked no argument. "We women have to help each other out here. Lord knows the world is hard enough without us making it harder on each other." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. For everything." "Oh, hush now. It is nothing." Mrs. Fletcher stood and handed Emma to Zelda. "Now, dinner will be ready in an hour. Why do not you go rest until then?" Zelda went up to her room and lay down on the bed with Emma beside her. For the first time since Samuel's death, she felt a fragile sense of hope. It was terrifying, this hope, because she knew how easily it could be shattered. But she held on to it anyway, because what else could she do? On the 5th day, Jacob came to visit. Zelda was sitting in the boarding house parlor, mending a tear in one of Emma's blankets, when Mrs. Fletcher announced she had a visitor. Her heart leaped foolishly when she saw Jacob standing in the doorway, hat in hand, his expression uncertain. "I hope I am not intruding," he said. "I wanted to check on you and Emma, make sure you are settling in all right." "You are not intruding," Zelda said, trying to ignore the way her pulse had quickened. "Please, come in." Jacob sat in the chair across from her, looking too large for the delicate furniture. He glanced around the parlor, then at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully in a basket by Zelda's feet. "She looks good," he observed. "Healthy." "She is. We both are, thanks to you." Zelda set aside her mending. "How is the ranch? Did you and Henry get the jobs you were hoping for?" "We did. It is hard work, but the pay is fair, and the foreman is decent. Henry and I are bunking in the hired hands' quarters." Jacob leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "How about you? Have you found work?" "I have. I will be helping at the school starting Monday, working with the younger children. It is not much money, but Mrs. Fletcher has offered to watch Emma during the day, so it will work out." "That is good." Jacob looked relieved. "I was worried about you." "You do not need to worry about me," Zelda said, though his concern warmed something inside her. "I can take care of myself and Emma. I know you can. I have seen how strong you are. Jacob met her eyes, and there was something in his gaze that made Zelda's breath catch. But it is all right to accept help when you need it. You do not have to do everything alone. I have been alone since Samuel died, Zelda said quietly. I suppose I am used to it now. You are not alone. You have Mrs. Fletcher and Caroline Pierce and me, if you need me. Jacob's voice was firm. I mean that, Zelda. If you need anything at all, you send word to the ranch and I will come. Zelda did not know what to say. She was not used to this kind of unwavering support, especially from someone who barely knew her. Why are you being so kind to me? She finally asked. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When I was 12, he said slowly, my mother died giving birth to my baby sister. My father was a drunk who could not take care of himself, let alone 2 children. We would have starved or frozen if a neighbor had not taken us in and raised us as her own. She did not have to do that. She gained nothing from it, but she did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. He looked at Zelda. I have never forgotten that kindness, and I decided a long time ago that if I ever had the chance to help someone the way we were helped, I would do it. So that is why I am being kind to you, because someone was kind to me once when I needed it most. Zelda felt tears sting her eyes. What happened to your father and sister? My father drank himself to death when I was 15. My sister Ruth grew up healthy and strong. She is married now, living in Colorado with her husband and 3 kids. I visit when I can. A small smile crossed Jacob's face. She is a good woman. She would like you. I wish I could meet her, Zelda said. Maybe someday you will. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Zelda found herself studying Jacob when she thought he was not looking. He was a handsome man, in a rough-hewn, weather-beaten sort of way. His hands were scarred and calloused from hard work, his face lined from years in the sun. But his eyes were kind, and there was a steadiness about him that made her feel safe. She thought about Samuel, about the life they had planned together, and for the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge that her marriage had not been a grand romance. Samuel had been a good man, and she had cared for him deeply, but theirs had been a practical union based on mutual respect and shared goals rather than passionate love. They had been partners, friends, companions, but they had never been swept away by emotion. Looking at Jacob Quinn, Zelda felt something she had never felt with Samuel, a flutter of genuine attraction, a pull she did not fully understand. It confused and frightened her. Samuel had been dead for less than 2 weeks. She should not be feeling this way about another man, especially not one who had simply shown her basic human kindness. I should go, Jacob said, standing. I have to be back at the ranch by sundown, but I will visit again soon, if that is all right with you. Of course, Zelda said, rising to walk him to the door. You are always welcome here, Jacob. He paused on the threshold, looking down at her. For a moment, she thought he was going to say something more. Then he simply tipped his hat and said, Take care, Zelda. After he left, Zelda stood in the parlor for a long time, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions in her chest. Grief for Samuel, gratitude for Jacob, confusion about her own feelings. It was too much, too complicated. He is a good man, Mrs. Fletcher said from the doorway, making Zelda jump. The older woman was watching her with knowing eyes. Yes, he is, Zelda agreed. It is all right, you know, to feel what you are feeling. I do not know what I am feeling, Zelda admitted. I think you do. You are just not ready to admit it yet. Mrs. Fletcher came into the parlor and put a hand on Zelda's shoulder. Your husband has only been gone 2 weeks. It is too soon to think about moving on. But when the time comes, do not punish yourself for wanting happiness again. You are young, and you have your whole life ahead of you. It feels wrong, Zelda whispered, to even think about another man when Samuel is barely cold in his grave. Grief is not a straight line, dear. It is messy and complicated, and everyone handles it differently. Give yourself time. The heart knows what it needs, even when the mind is not ready to accept it. Zelda nodded, grateful for the older woman's wisdom. She picked up Emma from her basket and held her close, drawing strength from her daughter's solid weight. Whatever happened next, she would face it. She had survived the blizzard and Samuel's death. She could survive this too. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Zelda worked at the school 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, helping the youngest children with their lessons. She discovered she had a natural talent for teaching, a patience and creativity that made learning fun for the students. Caroline Pierce praised her work and hinted that if the school budget increased, she might be able to offer Zelda more hours. In the evenings, Zelda returned to the boarding house and spent time with Emma, who was growing and thriving. The baby was more alert now, smiling and cooing, reaching for things with her tiny hands. Watching her daughter flourish filled Zelda with a fierce, protective love that sometimes took her breath away. Jacob visited twice more over those weeks, always in the early evening after his work at the ranch was done. They would sit in the parlor and talk, sometimes about nothing important, sometimes about deeper things. Zelda found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and worried her. On his third visit, Jacob brought a gift, a small wooden rattle he had carved for Emma. "I am not much of a craftsman," he said, almost shyly, as he handed it to Zelda, "but I thought she might like it." Zelda turned the rattle over in her hands, marveling at the smooth wood and the careful detail. "You made this yourself?" "Carved it in the evenings when I had time. It is not much, but—" "It is perfect," Zelda interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. She gave the rattle to Emma, who immediately grabbed it and shook it with delight. "Look, she loves it." Jacob smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. "I am glad." They sat together, watching Emma play, and Zelda felt a contentment she had not experienced in months. This, she thought, this is what happiness feels like. "How was your work at the ranch?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Good, hard, but good. We are preparing for the spring roundup, getting everything ready. It will be busy once it starts." Jacob glanced at her. "How is the teaching going?" "I love it," Zelda said honestly. "The children are wonderful, even the difficult ones. And Caroline has become a good friend. She's teaching me so much. I am glad you have found something you enjoy. You deserve that." They talked until the sun set and Jacob had to leave for the ranch. As Zelda watched him ride away, she felt Mrs. Fletcher's knowing gaze on her back. "You are falling in love with him," the older woman said. It was not a question. Zelda wanted to deny it, but she could not. "It is too soon," she said instead. "Samuel has only been dead for 5 weeks." "The heart does not follow a schedule," Mrs. Fletcher said gently. "And from what I can see, Jacob Quinn is falling just as hard for you." "He has not said anything," Zelda protested. "He does not have to. I can see it in the way he looks at you, the way he finds reasons to visit even though it takes him an hour to ride here from the ranch. That man is smitten, Zelda. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing," Zelda said firmly. "I'm not ready for this. I do not even know if I want this." But as she lay in bed that night, Emma sleeping peacefully beside her, Zelda had to admit the truth. She was falling in love with Jacob Quinn. It terrified her, but it was also exhilarating in a way she had never experienced before. With Samuel, love had grown slowly over time, a gentle affection built on shared experiences. With Jacob, it felt like being caught in a current, swept along by something powerful and irresistible. She did not know what to do with these feelings. She did not know if Jacob felt the same way. And she did not know if it was right to pursue happiness so soon after losing her husband. All she knew was that when Jacob visited, the world felt brighter. And when he left, she counted the days until she would see him again. Spring came to Desdemona, bringing warmer weather and wildflowers that dotted the prairie in splashes of color. Zelda had been in town for 2 months now, and she had settled into her new life with surprising ease. She was no longer the half-frozen widow Jacob had rescued from the snow. She was a teacher, a mother, a member of the community, but she still looked forward to Jacob's visits more than anything else. One evening in late April, Jacob arrived at the boarding house with a proposal. "There is a dance in town this Saturday," he said, twisting his hat in his hands. "A spring celebration. I was wondering if you might like to go with me." Zelda's heart skipped a beat. A dance was not just a friendly visit, it was a public declaration of interest, a statement to the whole town that they were courting. Was she ready for that? "I do not know if that is a good idea," she said carefully. "People will talk." "Let them talk," Jacob said. "I am tired of pretending I am just checking on you as a concerned friend. I care about you, Zelda. I have cared about you since the day I found you in the snow. And if you feel anything like what I am feeling, then I want to spend more time with you. Properly. Openly." Zelda's breath caught. Jacob, if you do not feel the same way, just tell me, he interrupted. I will understand, but if there is a chance, any chance at all, that you might want more than friendship, then give me that chance. Come to the dance with me. Zelda looked into his earnest blue eyes and felt something inside her shift and settle. She was tired of fighting her feelings, tired of second-guessing herself. Samuel was gone, and she would always honor his memory. But she was still alive, and so was Emma, and they deserved to build a new life filled with joy and possibility. Yes, she said softly. I will go to the dance with you. Jacob's face broke into a wide smile. Really? Really? Zelda found herself smiling back, feeling lighter than she had in months. But I should warn you, I am not much of a dancer. Neither am I, Jacob admitted. I guess we will figure it out together. The night of the dance, Zelda dressed in the one good dress she owned, a simple blue cotton gown she had managed to salvage from the wagon. Mrs. Fletcher helped her style her dark hair, pinning it up in a way that made her look elegant and mature. You look beautiful, Mrs. Fletcher said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Jacob is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you. Zelda laughed nervously. I hope not. That would make dancing rather difficult. Emma was already asleep in her basket, and Mrs. Fletcher had agreed to watch her for the evening. You go and have fun, the older woman said, shooing Zelda toward the door. And do not worry about Emma. She will be fine with me. Jacob was waiting outside, and when he saw Zelda, his expression made her blush. He looked rather handsome himself, dressed in clean trousers and a white shirt, his dark hair combed back, his beard neatly trimmed. You look lovely, he said, offering her his arm. Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself. They walked to the church hall where the dance was being held, and Zelda was acutely aware of the curious stares they received along the way. She knew people were speculating about her relationship with Jacob, wondering if it was proper for a widow to be courting so soon after her husband's death. But when Jacob looked down at her with those warm blue eyes, she found she did not care what anyone else thought. The church hall was decorated with ribbons and wildflowers, and a small band was playing lively music in the corner. People were dancing, laughing, enjoying the warm spring evening. Jacob led Zelda onto the dance floor, placing one hand at her waist and taking her other hand in his. Ready? He asked. As ready as I will ever be, Zelda replied. They began to dance, and it was clumsy and awkward at first. Jacob stepped on her toes twice, and Zelda nearly tripped over her own feet. But then they found their rhythm, moving together with increasing confidence. Zelda found herself laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time since Samuel's death. See, Jacob said, grinning down at her. We are not so bad at this. We are terrible, Zelda corrected, still laughing. But I do not care. They danced through several songs, then stepped outside for some fresh air. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead. Jacob led Zelda to a quiet spot away from the crowd, and they stood together in comfortable silence. Thank you for coming with me tonight, Jacob said. I know it was not an easy decision. I am glad I did, Zelda said honestly. I have not felt this happy in a long time. Jacob turned to face her, and the expression on his face made her heart race. Zelda, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right words for weeks, but I do not think there is a right way to say this, so I am just going to be honest. He took her hands in his. I am in love with you. I think I have been since the moment I saw you in the snow, fighting to keep your baby alive with nothing but pure willpower. You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever met, and I want to be with you, not just as a friend, but as something more. I want to court you properly, with the intention of marrying you, if you will have me. Zelda's eyes filled with tears. Jacob, I know it is fast, he continued. I know your husband has not been gone long, and I do not want to disrespect his memory. If you need more time, I will wait. I will wait as long as you need. But I had to tell you how I feel. I could not keep it inside any longer. Zelda reached up and cupped Jacob's bearded cheek with her hand. You are not disrespecting Samuel's memory. He would want me to be happy, to give Emma a good life. And you make me happy, Jacob. You make me feel alive in a way I have never felt before. I am in love with you too. Jacob's eyes widened. You are? Yes, Zelda whispered. I tried not to be. I told myself it was too soon, that I should wait. But I cannot help how I feel. and I do not want to wait anymore. Life is too short and too uncertain. I learned that when I almost died in the snow with my baby in my arms. So, yes, Jacob Quinn, I want you to court me, and if you still want to marry me after that, then yes, I will marry you." Jacob let out a shaky breath, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tender and full of promise, and Zelda felt like her heart might burst from the joy of it. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I have never been this happy," Jacob said, resting his forehead against hers. "I feel like I could take on the whole world." "Then it is a good thing you have me to keep you grounded," Zelda teased. They stayed outside for a while longer, talking and planning, before returning to the dance. This time, when they danced, Zelda did not care who was watching or what they were saying. She was in Jacob's arms, and she was happy, and that was all that mattered. Over the next 3 months, Jacob courted Zelda properly. He visited regularly, bringing small gifts for Emma and spending long evenings talking with Zelda in the boarding house parlor. They went on walks together, attended church together, and slowly became a fixture in Desdemona's social landscape. Not everyone approved. There were some who thought Zelda was moving on too quickly, who whispered behind her back about propriety and decency. But most people saw what Zelda and Jacob saw. Two good people who had found each other in unlikely circumstances and were building something beautiful together. Caroline Pierce was one of Zelda's staunchest supporters. "Do not listen to the gossips," she advised one afternoon as they prepared lessons together. "They have nothing better to do with their time than judge others. You and Jacob are good for each other. Anyone with eyes can see that." "Thank you," Zelda said gratefully. "It helps to have friends who understand." "Of course I understand. I have been watching you with Jacob, and I have never seen you happier, and Emma adores him. That tells me everything I need to know." It was true. Emma had taken to Jacob immediately, reaching for him with her little hands whenever he visited, babbling happily when he held her. Jacob, in turn, was wonderful with the baby, patient and gentle and clearly delighted by every milestone. "She called me Da yesterday," Jacob told Zelda one evening, his voice full of wonder. "I know she is too young to really know what it means, but still, it felt significant." "It is significant," Zelda said softly. "She sees you as her father, Jacob. You are the only father figure she has ever really known. Samuel died when she was so young. She has no memory of him. But you have been there for her whole life, at least as far as she is concerned." "I want to be her father," Jacob said seriously. "Not to replace Samuel, but to give her what she needs, if you will let me." "Of course I will let you." Zelda took his hand. "You already are her father, in every way that matters." In July, 6 months after Jacob had found Zelda and Emma in the snow, he proposed officially. He took Zelda on a picnic by the creek outside town, bringing a basket of food and a quilt to sit on. After they ate, he pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band. "It is not much," he said, suddenly nervous. "But it was my grandmother's. She left it to me when she died, told me to give it to the woman I loved when I was ready to settle down. I am ready now, Zelda. I want to spend the rest of my life with you and Emma. Will you marry me?" Zelda looked at the ring, then at Jacob, and felt a surge of pure, uncomplicated joy. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. 1,000 times yes." Jacob slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, long and deep, sealing their promise to each other. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "When should we get married?" Zelda asked. "As soon as possible," Jacob said. "I have already talked to Reverend Thomas. He said he could perform the ceremony whenever we are ready. I have also been saving money, and I think I have enough for us to rent a small house in town. It will not be fancy, but it will be ours." "I do not need fancy," Zelda said. "I just need you." They were married 2 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the church. Zelda wore a new dress that Mrs. Fletcher and Caroline had helped her sew, and Jacob wore his best suit. Emma was there, of course, dressed in a tiny white gown that made her look like an angel. The whole town turned out to witness the wedding, even those who had initially disapproved of the courtship. As Zelda walked down the aisle toward Jacob, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, the loss of Samuel, the terror of the blizzard, the desperate walk through the snow. It had been the worst time of her life, but it had also led her here, to this man who loved her and Emma with his whole heart. "Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Reverend Thomas asked. "I do," Zelda said, her voice clear and strong. "And do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Jacob said, looking at Zelda like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Jacob kissed Zelda tenderly, and the small congregation erupted in applause. As they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Zelda felt like her heart might overflow with happiness. The reception was held at the church hall, with food and dancing and laughter. Jacob held Emma on his hip while he danced with Zelda, the baby giggling at the movement. It was perfect, all of it, more than Zelda had ever dared to hope for. Later that night, after the celebration ended and they returned to their new home, a small but cozy house on the edge of town, Jacob carried Zelda over the threshold while she held Emma. "Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn," he said, setting her down gently. "Mrs. Quinn," Zelda repeated, testing the name. "I like the sound of that." They put Emma to bed in the small nursery Jacob had prepared, then sat together on the porch, watching the stars come out. Jacob wrapped his arm around Zelda's shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Zelda replied honestly. "6 months ago, I thought Emma and I were going to die in the snow. Now I am married to the man I love, with a roof over our heads and a future ahead of us. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream," Jacob assured her. "This is real. We are real. And I promise you, Zelda, I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you and Emma are happy and safe. That is my vow to you." "I know you will," Zelda said, turning to kiss him. "And I promise to do the same for you. We are a family now, the three of us. Nothing is going to change that." Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Jacob continued working at the Double R Ranch, and Zelda kept teaching at the school. Mrs. Fletcher watched Emma during the day, and in the evenings the three of them would gather in their little house, a family in every sense of the word. Jacob proved to be a wonderful husband and father. He was patient with Emma's nighttime crying, attentive to Zelda's needs, and hard-working in providing for their small family. He never spoke of Samuel with jealousy or resentment, but with respect for the man who had come before him. "He was Emma's father," Jacob said once when Zelda brought it up. "She has a right to know about him when she is old enough to understand. I am not trying to erase him from her life. I am just trying to give her the father she needs now." Zelda loved him even more for that generosity of spirit. The seasons turned, and their first anniversary approached. By then, Zelda was pregnant again, carrying Jacob's child. They were both thrilled and a little nervous about expanding their family. "What if I am not good enough?" Jacob worried one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on Zelda's growing belly. "What if I make mistakes?" "You will make mistakes," Zelda said honestly. "All parents do. But you will also love this child fiercely, just like you love Emma. That is what matters most." Their son was born in the spring, a healthy boy with Jacob's blue eyes and Zelda's dark hair. They named him Samuel Jacob Quinn. He would hold Samuel in one arm and Emma in the other, reading to both of them, or singing silly songs that made them laugh. Watching him with their children, Zelda often found herself overwhelmed with gratitude. This was the life she had never dared to imagine for herself, a life full of love and laughter and simple daily joys. 2 years after Samuel Jacob was born, Zelda gave birth to a daughter they named Ruth Margaret, after Jacob's sister and Mrs. Fletcher, who had become like a grandmother to their growing family. By then, Jacob had been promoted to foreman at the Double R Ranch, which came with better pay and a larger house on the ranch property. Moving to the ranch house was bittersweet. Zelda loved their little home in town, but the larger space would be better for their expanding family. And she would miss seeing Mrs. Fletcher every day, though the older woman promised to visit often. "You have built a beautiful life, Mrs." Fletcher said as she helped Zelda pack. "I am so proud of you, dear. Look at how far you have come." Zelda looked around the little house where she had started her new life, where she had fallen in love with Jacob, where they had begun their family. "I could not have done it without you," she said, hugging the older woman tightly. "You saved me just as much as Jacob did." "Nonsense. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to rest while you found your strength." Mrs. Fletcher pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Now go. Build your life with that good man of yours. And remember, I expect regular visits from my grandchildren." "Of course," Zelda promised. "You will be sick of seeing us." "Never," Mrs. Fletcher said firmly. "Never." Life at the ranch was different, but good. The house was large and comfortable, with enough room for all 3 children, and space for more if they were so blessed. Jacob thrived in his role as foreman, respected by the ranch hands and trusted by the owner. Zelda found purpose in creating a warm home for her family, though she occasionally missed teaching. "You could start teaching again if you wanted," Jacob suggested one evening. "The children are old enough now that we could manage." "Maybe someday," Zelda said. "Right now, I am happy where I am, but I appreciate you understanding that I might want more eventually." "Of course. You are more than just a wife and mother, Zelda. You are your own person with your own dreams. I never want you to feel like you have to give those up for our family." Zelda kissed him gratefully. This was what she loved most about Jacob: his respect for her as an individual, his recognition that she was a whole person with her own needs and desires. Samuel had been a good man, but he had never quite understood that about her. Jacob did, innately and without question. The years passed in a blur of children's laughter, hard work, and quiet contentment. Emma grew into a bright, inquisitive girl who loved reading and asking endless questions. Samuel Jacob was adventurous and fearless, always climbing trees or chasing after the ranch dogs. Ruth Margaret was gentle and thoughtful, often found caring for the barn cats or helping her mother in the kitchen. When Emma was 8 years old, she came to Zelda with questions about her birth father. Zelda had known this day would come, had prepared for it, but it still made her heart ache. "Tell me about him," Emma said, sitting beside her mother on the porch. "My real father." "Jacob is your real father," Zelda said gently. "But I understand what you mean. You want to know about Samuel, the man who helped bring you into this world." "Yes," Emma said quietly. "I do not remember him at all, but I want to know who he was." So Zelda told her daughter about Samuel Winters, his kindness, his steady nature, his dream of farming in California. She told Emma about the journey west, about Samuel's illness and death, about the desperate days after. "He loved you very much," Zelda finished. "Even though he only knew you for 6 months, he loved you with his whole heart. He would be so proud of the girl you have become." "Do you still love him?" Emma asked. Zelda thought carefully about her answer. "I will always care about Samuel. He was my first husband and he gave me you. But I love Jacob in a different way, a deeper way. Does that make sense?" Emma nodded slowly. "I think so. It is like how I love Grandma Fletcher and Aunt Caroline, but I love you and Papa more." "Exactly," Zelda said, relieved that her daughter understood. "Love is not a limited resource, Emma. You can love many people in different ways. Your heart is big enough for all of it." "I am glad Papa found us in the snow," Emma said. "Otherwise, we would have died, and I would never have known him, or Samuel Jacob, or Ruth." "I am glad too," Zelda agreed, pulling her daughter close. "So very glad." That night, Zelda told Jacob about the conversation. He listened thoughtfully, then said, "I am glad she asked. She deserves to know where she came from. And I never want her to feel like she has to choose between Samuel's memory and me. There is room in her heart for both." "You are a good father," Zelda said, her voice thick with emotion. "The best father our children could have asked for." Jacob kissed her forehead. "I am just trying to live up to what you and these kids deserve." When Emma was 10, Samuel Jacob was 8, and Ruth was 6. Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. This time, it was twins, a boy and a girl they named Thomas and Catherine, after Reverend Thomas and Caroline Pierce, both of whom had become dear friends over the years. With 5 children, life was chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. The house was never quiet, always filled with the sounds of children playing, arguing, laughing. Jacob handled the chaos with patience and good humor, and Zelda found she thrived in the organized chaos of their large family. "How did we end up with 5 children?" Jacob joked one evening as they collapsed into bed, utterly exhausted. "I believe it involved a great deal of enthusiasm on your part," Zelda teased back. Jacob laughed, pulling her close. "No regrets." "Not a single one," Zelda said honestly. "This life, this family, you, it is everything I never knew I needed." As the children grew, each one developing their own personality and dreams, Zelda often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. If someone had told her, on that frozen day when Jacob found her in the snow, that she would end up married to him with 5 children and a life full of joy, she would never have believed them. But here she was, living proof that sometimes the worst moments of your life can lead to the best ones. That sometimes losing everything opens the door to gaining something even better. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jacob surprised Zelda with a trip to the place where he had found her. They rode out to the spot, just the two of them, leaving the children with Mrs. Fletcher and Caroline. "This is it," Jacob said as they stood on the windswept prairie. "This is where I saw you, kneeling in the snow with Emma in your arms." Zelda looked around at the landscape, now green and lush with summer grass. It was hard to imagine it buried under snow, hard to remember the terror and despair she had felt that day. It seemed like another lifetime, another person entirely. "My fire is yours now," she said quietly, remembering his words from that first night. "That is what you said to me when you brought us to your camp. Do you remember?" "I remember," Jacob said. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. Everything I have, everything I am, is yours." "And mine is yours," Zelda replied, taking his hand. "Thank you for saving us, Jacob. Thank you for giving us a life worth living." "Thank you for letting me," Jacob said, pulling her into his arms. "Thank you for taking a chance on a broken-down cowboy who did not know the first thing about being a husband or a father." "You knew more than you thought," Zelda said. "You knew how to love. That was all that mattered." They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the place where their story had begun, grateful for the unlikely chain of events that had brought them together. Then they mounted their horses and rode back toward the ranch, toward their children and their life and their future. The years continued to unfold, bringing both joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Mrs. Fletcher passed away when she was 83, surrounded by the family she had helped Zelda build. Caroline married a banker from Austin and moved away, though she and Zelda maintained a faithful correspondence. The ranch prospered under Jacob's management, and he eventually became a partner in the business. Emma grew into a beautiful, intelligent young woman who shocked everyone by deciding to become a teacher, just like her mother. Samuel Jacob took after his father, working cattle and eventually running his own ranch. Ruth became a skilled seamstress and opened a dress shop in Desdemona. Thomas went to college and became a lawyer. Catherine married a doctor and had 4 children of her own. Through it all, Zelda and Jacob remained the steady center of their family's universe. The love story that had begun in desperation and blossomed into something lasting and true. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Jacob raised a glass to toast his wife. 25 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite the gray in his hair and the lines on his face, I found a woman and a baby freezing in the snow. I had no idea that saving them would be the best decision I ever made. Zelda, you have given me a life beyond anything I ever dreamed of. You have given me love, family, purpose, and joy. I thank God every day that I rode that particular trail on that particular day. To my wife, the strongest woman I have ever known, and to our family, our greatest achievement. Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the toast. Zelda felt tears stream down her face as she looked around at all the people she and Jacob had created. This beautiful, sprawling family that had started with 2 broken people and a baby in the snow. To Jacob, she said, her voice breaking with emotion, the man who saved my life and then spent every day after making it worth living. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Thank you for your fire, your warmth, your endless generosity of spirit. You are the best man I have ever known. They kissed as their family cheered, and Zelda thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. She had lost so much in that blizzard, her husband, her possessions, nearly her life and her daughter's life. But in losing everything, she had found what she really needed, a man who loved her unconditionally, a family built on that love, and a future full of possibilities. That night, as she and Jacob lay in bed in the house they had shared for so many years, Zelda traced the lines of his face with her fingers, memorizing every detail. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob asked, catching her hand and kissing her palm. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Zelda said. "How lucky we are. Against all odds, we found each other and built this beautiful life. Not everyone gets that kind of second chance." "No," Jacob agreed. They do not. But we did, and I will never take it for granted, not for a single day. Neither will I, Zelda promised. They fell asleep in each other's arms, the way they had nearly every night for 25 years, and the way they would continue to for the rest of their lives together. The story of how Jacob found Zelda and Emma in the snow became a family legend, passed down through generations. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would ask to hear it again and again, marveling at the courage it had taken to survive, the kindness that had saved them, and the love that had grown from such unlikely beginnings. And every time the story was told, it ended the same way, with the words Jacob had spoken that first night when he brought two freezing strangers to his fire and changed all their lives forever. My fire is yours now. A simple promise that became the foundation of a love story spanning decades, a family legacy built on compassion and second chances, and a reminder that sometimes the coldest, darkest moments of our lives are just the prelude to the warmth and light that follows. Zelda and Jacob Quinn lived long, full lives surrounded by the family they had created together. When they finally passed, within months of each other, they were laid to rest side by side in the Desdemona Cemetery, their headstone bearing their names, the years of their lives, and a simple inscription: from cold and darkness, they found warmth and light. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continued the legacy they had built, carrying forward the lessons of resilience, compassion, and enduring love. And though many years passed and the world changed in countless ways, the story of the cowboy who found a woman and her baby starving in the cold and offered them his fire remained a testament to the power of human kindness and the unexpected ways that love can transform our lives. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the hardships they had endured or the obstacles they had overcome, but the love they had chosen and the family they had built together. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, full of adventure and danger and triumph, but at its heart, it was simply the story of two people who found each other when they needed it most and decided to walk through life together, hand in hand, come what may. And that was everything.